I'd be willing to bet there's a good chance that you've heard the phrase, you have to constantly switch heroes to counter what your opponents are doing. Well, I'm here today to talk with you guys about the opposing view on that matter and how it may not be the greatest idea to constantly be switching heroes, and maybe, just maybe, you should try getting really good with a few. How's it going, everybody? Force here, and today we're going to talk about the idea of not switching heroes every single match, every time you get something that may be even slightly difficult that you're going against, and maybe you pick a main. Maybe you grab one character and you stick with them for a significant amount of times throughout the course of a few days or a few weeks, and to actually improve at that hero rather than swapping non-stop. So this past week I kind of did a little bit of an experiment, but also as preparation for an upcoming video that I'm working on. I decided I wanted to make some guides for the different heroes, and in doing that I actually wanted to really learn how to play them very well. And so I picked Tracer this week. And what I decided to do was basically exclusively stick with Tracer. Now, a few of you are going to hear that and probably start screaming at your computer screens instantly. But what about in this situation? And oh, that means you weren't countering what your opponents were doing, or you weren't filling certain roles, you weren't doing X, Y, and Z. You dragged down your team, you're a bad team player, you should go play, I don't know, insert solo game. Oh, Call of Duty, that's I'm sure what most people would say. You should go play Call of Duty if you just want to run around and do your own thing. Well, listen, here's what I learned. While I agree with the general consensus that this is a game that is about countering the opposing team's composition, I would also say that, especially now, while the game is still fresh, that there's a lot of value in practicing and learning, really learning the intricacies of a couple of heroes, or maybe even just one. Like, for example, me, I'm almost going to exclusively play one hero all week for the upcoming weeks so that I can work on these guides and share some information on what I learn with you guys, but also just to improve of them, just to really understand them. Something I learned this week while playing Tracer are a lot of the small things that I would have never learned if I always just stuck to the heroes that I was comfortable with, if I just kept playing McCree and Junkrat and Pharah and Mei, the heroes that I'm constantly playing almost every game since launch. But sticking with her, I started to learn her strengths. I started to learn her weaknesses. And that's something that I would have never picked up if I would just occasionally play her when I felt like, hey, we could use a Tracer right now to harass their backline. Because every time I had done that, I'd have a pretty mediocre showing. Yeah, maybe here and there I'd get a 5-10 player kill streak, but I never felt like I was that effective. I never felt like I was doing a real good job. Whereas in playing Tracer all week and really starting to understand how does she play against each of the matchups, which heroes are a huge threat, which ones are easy to dance around and take out, what maps am I good on, what sections of the maps am I good on. I would have never learned that, and I would have never done that in the past. Most of the times in the past, I would have just automatically switched heroes. But going through that process and learning what I can get away with and where I can be effective, and then consequently, where I can't, that gave me valuable information. And here's another fantastic example. McCree. McCree is known as a hero who's made to counter Tracer, as well as Reaper. Those backline harassers, McCree is supposed to be able to quickly take him out. That's his intended role. So there was a few times where I'd come up against a McCree, he would flashbang and kill me, just like that. And then he'd do it again. Now, in the past, if I hadn't made this decision to stick it out with Tracer and try to make her work and try to learn her, I would have just switched to another hero. But you know what I did? I instead adapted. I figured out, how can I make this work? There's a McCree on the team. He's doing a pretty good job of trying to find me. How can I still make Tracer work? So I started to figure out how far away I needed to stay from him so that he couldn't flashbang me. And I actually began to have a good matchup against McCree, a hero who is who is designed to destroy me as Tracer. I began to feel comfortable around him. I said, well, as long as I keep my distance and I'm on point with my shooting and I'm constantly blinking around so that he can't line up good shots on me, I can take him out. And I got comfortable to the point where I was no longer afraid when I saw McCree. I kept my distance, I did my dance, and I'd win. I would win a lot of those engagements as long as I didn't let him get close enough. And that is the sort of knowledge, that's the sort of thing that you will never get if you just go, well, I gotta switch heroes now because I died once and oh, there's no way this is gonna work out. And that's where I think there's gonna be a lot of value in the idea of really sticking to a hero. Now, I'm not saying be too stubborn, and I'm not saying, hey, if you guys have no healer and you're getting totally demolished, someone should switch to a healer and maybe it should be you. But what I am saying is really consider just hunkering down, sticking with a hero, because you're gonna learn so much how to play that hero better. You're gonna learn a lot more about their strengths and weaknesses if you go through it yourself and if you try to workshop it and figure it out. And don't just listen to that person in the group who's yelling at you because you've died 2 times. You gotta switch heroes, you suck here. Nah. Stick through it, learn about it, really figure it out, because you know what's gonna happen? You're not gonna die as much to that exact situation. Even though this is a game in many ways that has a rock, paper, scissors scenario, you'll figure things out, you'll learn to adapt, and you'll learn things that you would have never learned otherwise. I, in the past, would have told you that I kind of suck as Tracer, and that was a large part of the reason why I never played her. Right now, I actually feel like I'm pretty good. Like, I was consistently getting 17, 18, 20 player kill streaks over this past week after the first few days of me really figuring out her movement, how, you know, reloading while blinking, constantly trying to get behind heroes, try to be unpredictable, saving up my teleports for combat and not just going into combat with only 1 pip, but making sure I constantly had 2 to 3, how to strafe around certain targets, which targets I should get around, all of that stuff. I would have never known that, and I would have just continued to stay bad at Tracer. But now in the future, going forward, anytime a situation arises where we could use a Tracer, I now know that I can play her very well. And now I'm gonna be that much more of an asset to my team because I decided to not constantly switch and not, you know, just scratch the surface with a ton of heroes, but really dig deep with one. And I'm gonna take this sort of learning experience and I'm gonna carry it forward, and I'm gonna go through the entire roster of heroes in these coming months. And I'm actually really excited about that process. There's something very enjoyable about kind of persevering in situations where you think you should just switch right away and figuring things out and workshopping through it, like I said. Really, right now, for you guys, I want the biggest takeaway from this video to be not just like how I experienced my Tracer practice week, but the idea that spending more time and getting drastically better with a single hero can ultimately be much more beneficial to your team than just being average at a bunch of heroes. And I think there's a lot more value to that than people would lead you to believe, because the majority consensus that I hear from people all the time is you gotta constantly switch, you gotta constantly adapt. And I'm just here to sort of maybe give you a little bit of a different perspective, that maybe, just maybe, you should stick with someone for a while and see it through and get a lot better as a result. And in the end, this is gonna make you a much better teammate. All right, guys, that is gonna do it for me here today. Just sharing with you some of my thoughts and what I've learned in this past week. And, well, I'd like to know what you guys think about this topic as well. Do you think that you should constantly switch heroes no matter what? Or do you see value in spending a bit of time with a few heroes and really learning them well? Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you all have a fantastic afternoon, and until next time, I'll see you later.